All right, welcome everybody. We're up a couple of minutes late. We apologize for that, but the Jets press avails went a little bit late. So here we are. And first off, Kenny, I heard that you're trying to get away with something here tonight. I heard you're trying to get away with something here tonight. My sources tell me, and you know my sources, they're lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. Is it your birthday right now?
It is, yeah.
It's your birthday.
Yeah. Well, this is what 46 looks like.
This is what I was just going to ask you how old you were. I wasn't going to say it though because I heard Altona guys are pretty vain and they don't like to talk about that kind of stuff. But here you are,
class of '75, buddy. Class of '75. Happy to be spending it with you right now. Bringing it in.
Hey, happy to be spending this time with you as well, ringing in the birthday with my man, Kenny. So first off, let's just get right down to it. The clear and obvious story on this evening is Andrew Copp in a 4-goal game. And I mean, come on, how does a guy time and time again come out and say, hey, I'm going to get something done here tonight. I'm going to make it happen, and backs up the words with actions. What did you think of that performance tonight?
Well, I mean, some people see obstacles, Sean. Andrew Copp sees opportunity. That's how I'd like to describe it. It's incredibly impressive what he's been able to do during these last couple of years. Here's a guy who's openly talked about his, desire to become a top 6 player, but after spending some time in that role earlier this year, he settled back in on that line with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton and just continues to deliver. I mean, he delivers defensive play, he delivers offense, and I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, he went through a dry spell, but guess what? He's still been one of the most consistent players on this roster. He's a contributor whether he's scoring goals or not, and tonight, all of his hard work that he's been putting in over the last couple of years when other people have told him he can't become a goal scorer at this level, now he's got 10 goals with 23 games to go. I mean, this is another great example of a player who has developed. He started on the 4th line, became a checking line player, but as he told me before the game, they don't view themselves as just a checking line anymore, Sean. So it's been an impressive transformation, and honestly, there's still more for Andrew Copp to give, but I mean, just that genuine enthusiasm, Sean. I mean, you knew that Andrew Copp was going to be thrilled about his first hat trick, but when I asked him about the last time he scored, like, how about the look in his face when I asked him, and he thought he might not have ever had 4 goals before. I mean, yeah, this is a guy that's had to earn every single thing at every level. Walk on at Michigan, had to go out and earn a spot with the U.S. National Development Team program after not being on the team at the start of the year. They had a couple injuries. That opened the door for him. This is a guy that's constantly had to, kick the door down and is seeing some rewards for his hard work.
Now, how do you go? And first, I want to bring this one up. Another birthday wish from you here for you from Rick TLU. Rick, too many of his tee shots have found the hole. He's used his up for a lifetime. I appreciate you giving him wishes, but I don't think I can talk about a world in which Ken Wiebe has 4 hole-in-ones. 3 in 1 year was enough, but yeah, we'll take it. Hey, you bring it up. A player that, by all the looks of it, should have been maybe just happy to be a college hockey player. And then after that, you've realized the dream. You've been an NHL player who, made it and played a couple games. And, well, beyond that, he keeps grinding and ends up being a player who's established a long career in the NHL. Now, to add this element, I thought it was so fascinating. Paul Maurice was talking about how he's become that, how he's worked on it. And I thought it was interesting the role he talked about in Mark Scheifele getting him to here. You see those 2 players will walk out during practices. They'll be the first 2 on the ice. They start working with each other. This is a guy who has watched the habits of an elite offensive player who's become more and more elite through his habits and kind of tried to glean those habits, and it sure looks like it's worked.
Yeah, it certainly has. And the work, you see them putting in the work daily. You see Andrew Copp doing those tip plays during practice, before practice, at the end of practice when everyone's left the ice, taking one-timers. it's not just that. These guys, I mean, they were roommates. They lived together. They love to talk hockey. They're passionate about the game. But here's the other part, Sean. In one of my stories I worked on last year for The Athletic, when I sat down with Andrew Copp for an extensive period and talked about his time in Michigan as a quarterback and those things, both Copp and Mark Scheifele talked about that willingness to hold one another accountable. And again, these guys are good friends, but they also could have that real talk. When one of them wasn't going, you heard about it from your friend that you were living with. And both of them talked about how they had to openly embrace that concept because, hey, let's face it, everyone loves to be told how great they're playing. But when it's not going well, that's not always easy. So to have someone like that to lean on, and the other part of that too is that Andrew started working with Adam Oates as well. So I think that's obviously a factor as well in terms of the skill. But here's the other part, Sean. Andrew Copp knew what he needed to get better at, and that was finishing. His hockey IQ allowed him to get plenty of opportunities both for himself and his line mates. Generating opportunities was never the problem for Andrew Copp. It was finishing them and turning those chances into goals. And he's worked incredibly hard to work on that finish. And we saw some examples of that today. And I think you just have to go out and give all the credit in the world to those guys when their work ethic leads to results. But the best part about Andrew Copp is always this, and he made that abundantly clear in that post-game interview. He's thrilled about having his first 4-goal game, but never satisfied and always pushing for more. And that's an easy thing to say, Sean, but to go out and do it, that sometimes is something else. But that he feels like he's just scratching the surface here.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. The guy's always backing up his words with results. And you hear this saying time and time again, preparation equals confidence. No one or very few players prepare like Andrew Copp does, and the confidence is coming. I also liked what you said about Scheifele. Oh, first, I wanted to bring something up here. MC Stuttering Buddha says it's almost midnight here in Saskatchewan. I'm ready for a full-hour show. Are you, though? Don't threaten Ken Weeb with a good time. He'll go till 5 a.m. You're not outlasting this guy. Who do you think you are, MC Stuttering Buddha? Back to that Scheifele and that Copp relationship. It reminds me of earlier in the season when they were kind of clashing in a drill earlier, and Copp kind of gave it to Scheifele pretty hard, and Scheifele looked a little bit mad afterwards, and we asked him about it in the media afterwards, and Copp had said, yeah, I think he's probably revoked the friend card for the day. I love that line, but what I love about that is he's earning it. He's earning the time and the respect and the knowledge that he gets from Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele isn't given this for free. These two players are challenging each other and building off each other. And I don't know that I can think of too many examples of a player who is basically, I think any scout would have told you his max would be a fourth to third line, full-on checking player. I don't know that there's anyone out there who would have thought that Andrew Copp would be adding the offensive element to his game that we've seen from him so far this season.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing. Andrew Copp went from walk-on at Michigan to being the captain in his junior year before he left college. I mean, to join the Jets. I mean, that says something about his character and leadership. And man, it's been an impressive story to watch. And like I said, there are several more chapters to come when it comes to Andrew Copp.
You know what I thought was pretty funny is my cousin was texting me as the game was going on, and I noticed this right off the bat when he scores the empty net goal. I was a touch surprised that he didn't give a look to Mason Appleton, who was on the breakaway and the sure player to get the goal if he just flips it ahead to him. Now, I think it's a moot point because I think Mason Appleton was so far ahead that even if Copp misses the net, it negates the icing, right? So it's not necessarily a risky play. But it just did strike me as the more risky of the two plays, and he acknowledged that afterwards. Did you find some humor in the fact that Andrew Copp went for the hat trick rather than setting up his guy, who he said he's probably got to buy him a bottle of wine after the game for that?
Well, the other part of that too, Sean, that's a 3-0 game versus if that's a 2-0 game, I don't think Andrew Copp takes the shot even though he knows it's for the hat trick. I think they had a little bit more of a cushion in that situation. But also too, I mean, those guys on the bench know. I mean, they're trying to get those guys their hat trick. They know he hasn't had one in his career. They're saying too, hey, if you miss the net and it's icing, don't worry. Lowry's saying, I'll win the faceoff. Don't worry about it. But, I mean, the acknowledgement that he knows that in a similar situation, he would have been going out of his way to get Appleton the puck. And he knew that if he could somehow catch up to Appleton, he would have looked for him there as well. So I think the ability to know what the score was impacted in that game. But that's the other part. You have to have the confidence to take that shot, and you have to know that the coach has your back if you miss the net in that situation. So I think that he's earned that trust with, I mean, now Paul Maurice pointed it out again. I mean, here's a guy that almost has no defensive zone tape to show you. So the fact that he goes for the empty net in that situation, I think that he's got a little bit more in that reservoir that we talked about the other day.
I want to bring this point up here. Troy Stevens says Canucks look like they've quit on the season. A response to that headshot right after that says, if you watch the Sabres tonight, you know what a team looks like when they've given up. But I will say this, Ken, going back to this comment here. If I'm a Canucks fan, I'm not very happy with this game tonight at all. Now, I know they put up a lot of shots. Let me just get through this point here. I know they put up a lot of shots, but in a series where you can't score against a goaltender, to go out and get back-to-back bench penalty minors for too many men that result in 2 goals, those are mistakes. When you need wins like this team needs right now, those are mistakes you cannot be making. That's a lack of focus. In my mind, there's no forgiveness for this. And I'm not letting the coach off the hook. I'm not letting the players off the hook. I think it's a damning indictment on that entire team that they dug themselves a hole tonight with that kind of sloppiness in a game that they needed to win against a team that they could not afford to fall in that hole to.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, Sean, but I don't think that they quit. I mean, this is a team that just went 8-2-1 and played the majority of that time without their best player, Elias Pettersson. So I'm not tossing an indictment like that around. I don't think that they've quit. I mean, they're not in the same situation as the Sabres. They're still in a real battle for 4th place. I mean, I understand that this was not a good effort. I didn't particularly like the effort of Brock Besser the last couple of games, to be completely honest. And again, that's not a knock on him, but when guys are out and guys like Bo Horvat are playing injured, if you're the leading goal scorer with 16, you need to be the one driving the bus. And we saw what the Jets' top line did. I just didn't see enough of that. But at the same time, I mean, the Canucks did generate a lot of shots. And again, Connor Hellebuyck at the start of that second period, if Hellebuyck's not sharp when there was that 6 or 8 shot barrage out of the gate, but then as you mentioned, the Canucks totally let them back in with that silly bench minor. I mean, the power play is what got the Jets going, right? I mean, the Jets had no legs to start the second period. They were having it taken to them, but then they got a goal, and then they found their way to steady themselves. But that's what a difference maker between the net does for a team. And hey, Thatcher Demko's had an amazing month of March, but right now he's not Connor Hellebuyck. And he can't be because it's his first year as an NHL starter. I think he could grow into that type of goalie, and he's played great. But right now, Connor Hellebuyck is in difference maker mode, and this should not surprise anyone. If you looked at him on the podium like you and I did on Saturday night, you knew that Connor Hellebuyck was going to deliver a performance like he did the last couple of games.
Yeah, you know what, we should get this out of the way because I called a 5-2 game. You called a 3-1 game. And what you called was you called a 3-1 game, you called the one right, and you called a phenomenal goaltending performance. So you had that right. I think audience, and a lot of you were here last night. And Ken,
let's get the vote. Let's get the votes in.
We're not
get your votes in.
We're not doing the vote tonight. We're not doing the.
Sean, you tell the people what I texted you. We're not debating about this because I've already conceded. It's not like the U.S. election. I have already conceded the victory to you tonight. There will be there's no recount required. I have conceded the victory to you, even though I'm pretty confident in my own pick.
I just got to say this. I know what those boxers felt like when they went in and put in a great performance and left it in the hands of the judge, and the judges took it away from them, because that's what our audience did last night. It was a robbery. It was highway robbery.
Come on now. That's not true.
I had to go out. I had to take it out of the judge's hands and win it tonight, 5-2. I get goal differential. I get one of the scores, so I'm walking away with it. And just so everyone knows it, we got to land on this, Kenny. We got to figure out what we're going to do. But Kenny and I are keeping score on these pregame predictions, and at the end of the season, whoever wins is going to get the other person to do something. It's got to be some kind of challenge, and we're going to videotape it so you can all see it. It's going to be great. Let's move on to something else. Oh, hey, this is something I thought was interesting. To your point about the Jets not being able to get a lot generated, one thing that I thought has been interesting about them so far this season is when they are having trouble getting to the front of the net, they go to that high slot tip from the point, exactly like we saw from Neil Pionk. Why is that working so well from them? Is it one of those things where you fight to get to the front of the net and the other team just loads up, and then that opens that kind of that parting the Red Sea right down the middle and creating that opportunity for Copp? Because it looks like an obvious play when they pull it off.
Sure. I think the other part of that too, though, like Ehlers demands so much attention with the way he reloads in that spot on that left point. And again, just that second unit has just been fantastic. And again, talk about it. Blake Wheeler's reaction to my question the other day about the power play was almost the exact same as Andrew Copp's today when I was, complimenting the checking line for their ability, to be able to produce offense without sacrificing the defense. But Blake Wheeler said they're not. Who's calling them the second power play unit? He certainly wasn't, and he talked about the respect that they have for that other unit. And now it's 14-12 in terms of power play goals, and just such an impressive job. And again, it's going to the dirty areas. Copp gets an impressive tip, and then goes to the net and gets another one. So it's been impressive to see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think too, most teams have to prepare for both units now, Sean. It's not just, you don't just have to watch out for the Laine one-timer, or you can't just watch out for this. I mean, I understand too, people are saying, oh, well, it's only the second unit's the only one producing. Well, that's not accurate either. I mean, right before that goal was scored, you had one-timers from Scheifele and Connor that sort of paved the way. I think that's the one thing. Even when that first unit's not rolling completely or scoring, they're still generating some buzz. It's not like, last year, at times when the momentum was lost during some of those power plays and that unit stayed out for 90 seconds to 100 seconds. So it's been impressive to see. And there's a push. There's a genuine push there. You gotta love when people know your roots. I mean, hey, I love the farmer sausage, and I will not apologize for that. I got my 20,000 steps in today. I'm not going to feel guilty at all. But it's been really impressive, and you're seeing them score in different ways. I mean, you saw an interchange today between Ehlers and Pionk, where you saw 2 one-timers from Pionk, not from the top, but from where Ehlers is often at. So I think the Jets are doing a nice job of finding different ways to score. And again, let's not forget, Kyle Connor has 8 power play goals, so don't tell me that the first unit is not getting anything done, because that's just not accurate, and that will not fly here. And having 2 units, we've pounded this home. Hang on. You and I both have pounded this home for a long time, Sean. And a lot of people said, oh, well, no, you don't need 2 units. Well, Tampa needs 2 units, and the Jets need 2 units, because you can't always count on 1 unit performing, and that will also apply to the second unit. They're going through a really hot streak, and they deserve all the props they're getting, but don't suggest for a minute that the top power play unit has not gotten its business taken care of either.
You know what, Kenny? I referenced departing the Red Sea earlier. I love it when you have your Moses, thou shalt not pass moments here. No, we are not taking this. I am rejecting this. I felt it. Now, I want to get quickly back to this before we move on to the next thing. Look, this is why I didn't want it to go to a vote, because this is stacked. Are you paying these people to show up and come with this
you know what my budget is. I don't have any money to pay.
These people, I can't leave it in the hands of the judges. I need to win outright. You talked about different styles or getting things done in different ways. And one thing that I found, I asked Paul Maurice about it today. He kind of went into a long conversation about each of the 4 lines and what they do. But the idea of the Jets not only being deep, but having differentiating styles in between the 4 lines that they play, and different styles that are very, very effective and all in very different ways, and how hard that can be to defend against. What's your take on what he had to say about that?
Yeah, super interesting and totally accurate. I mean, what kind of offense is being generated by those top 2 lines for sure. And the same thing applies to the penalty kill and the power play. I mean, you want to sort of have a structure that you stick and lean on, but you have to defend differently because they attack you differently. The top unit attacks from down low and on the wall, but the other unit has so much motion, and it moves between Ehlers and Pionk, and then you get a lot of traffic around the front of the net. You cause a lot of chaos. Again, there's Matthew Perreault creating chaos in front again as well. I mean, that's a great thing that they can do. I mean, you have to have that willingness to go to the front of the net, and when you can do that, then you can open up some things on the side walls. And I think another thing that we're seeing, Sean, Pierre-Luc Dubois is really starting to get comfortable on that side as well. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen it in some of the practices. I mean, there haven't been a lot of practices lately, but Dubois is a guy that can really shoot it. And if they start to take away the other side of the ice, the way they used to try to do it with Laine, Dubois is going to get himself in a similar shooting lane as to what Kyle Connor is getting through right now. So it is really interesting the way that's going. But the other part too, I mean, I thought there were some shifts where all the different lines had zone time, even the fourth line. I mean, that's something that the Jets are really getting done. And I know there's been a lot of talk about how can Harkins be sitting, but right now the fourth line is getting their job done, their responsibilities. The penalty kill has been very solid for the Jets, getting better. And it's just right now there's no room in the inn for some of those young guys to get in. So, but at the same time, it's hard to argue with the results. And I mean, those guys are playing well. And the fact that there's that balance now on those top three lines, I think is very important for the Jets, because you can take one away, but if you're going to have to probably take three lines away in order to put them away in a 4-7 series.
I love this comment here from Dale Sawchuk, who fell asleep during the game but woke up to catch the post game with Kenny and Rennie. How do you like that much? Says he missed a Stanley scrap. Ken, I don't know when you played if you were much of a fighter. I'll tell you this: I hated fighting tall, skinny guys, because if they get you on the end of your arm, if they can lock that arm off, you are in a ton of trouble. And so, Dale, if you go check out the fight, at the beginning of the fight, Stanley does exactly that. He kind of gets McEwen locked off on the end of his arm. Now, McEwen fights his way back into the fight and gets the takedown, but it's funny, post-game, Stanley talked about enjoying that fight, and you could see in the moment, like, yeah, this guy is enjoying it, and that's the last thing I want to see if I'm fighting a guy, is that he's enjoying himself in this whole thing. What did you think that did for the team, and what does he earn with his teammates and his coach by doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I can admit I wasn't much of I was feisty, but I wouldn't necessarily be known for my scrapping abilities. That's for sure. But I didn't mind mixing it up. Stanley's a guy who really enjoys fighting. So what he said was no surprise. This is a guy who Warren Reichel told me was one of the toughest guys in the Ontario Hockey League when he played there. Enjoyed dropping the mitts when he had to with the Manitoba Moose. And let's just say this right here: this will not be his last NHL fight, no. Sean. He enjoys getting involved, and I mean, as you know, there it is. I mean, we know that Paul Maurice enjoys guys who like mixing it up, and that will, get him some props from his teammates as well, being willing to, step up when it needs. I mean, both guys, Zach McEwen was trying to get some energy going from his group. Same with Logan Stanley. I mean, they're not afraid. But more importantly for Stanley, he's just been steady. I mean, that's the other part too. I've really liked that pairing a lot the last couple of games. Very steady, smart decisions. And the one thing we continue to see from Logan Stanley, a massive amount of shot attempts. I think it's just a matter of time before either he gets one or there's going to be a redirection or something. I mean, is able to generate, yes, we understand it's sheltered minutes for the most part on the third pairing, but Paul Maurice isn't afraid to play Dylan DeMello, so you're going to see them be getting ice time. I mean, he played almost 17 minutes the other night, so I think his confidence is just continuing to grow, and I really believe he's just starting to scratch the surface. I understand some of the analytics suggest that maybe, he's not going to grow into, a top four defenseman, but I would counter by that. I mean, there aren't a lot of analytics out there for players of his size and skill set. So I think, yes, the Jets had to be patient in order for him to arrive at this point. Let's just slow down in terms of ceilings. I mean, because a lot of people were saying that Stanley can't be anything more than a third line pairing. Never thought he'd make it anyway. So let's just let this guy continue to develop and see where things go from there.
What do you think about that pairing with DeMello? I mean, I'd asked him about playing
yeah.
with him earlier on, and one of the things that I thought was, the response that he gave, he didn't go too in deep on what he likes about playing with DeMello. But the one thing that I heard that I really liked was he talked about how communicative DeMello was. And is that not exactly what you need if you're a young player playing your first year in the league, is having a guy who's been there, done it before, who's constantly talking to you, constantly communicating, constantly telling you where he's going and where you need to look, and those in tight movements that DeMello's made to kind of relieve the pressure down low. Is he not the perfect guy to be playing? I know you beat the drum with getting DeMello up there with Morrissey, but is he not the perfect guy to be playing with Stanley right now?
He really is, and for all those reasons that you mentioned. And of course, that ability to communicate is massive when you have a young player, especially one who's trying to find his way. But I really have been impressed by that pairing. I think having a guy of that size is also really helpful for Dylan DeMello. So I think that they read off each other. And as I've said numerous times, Dylan DeMello always puts himself in a spot to be a safety valve for his partner, which again is important when you're playing with a young guy, because with inexperienced players, there are occasionally going to be mistakes, but there haven't been a lot of those mistakes with that pairing, and I've been really impressed by what I've seen from them. And this is not revisionist history for me, Sean. You know this. I saw Logan Stanley play for Team Canada at Grand Forks at the under-18 tournament. I was very impressed with him then. I watched his career in junior very closely. I stayed in tune with what was going on in his career. And this was always going to be a guy who it was going to be slow played. We totally understand. Is he where Sam Girard is right now? Absolutely not. But let's just let this develop and see where it goes.
Well, what I'm interested in, and I had that comment up earlier about people started bringing in Calgary because that's where we're heading next. But that got me thinking when you're talking about that, adding PLD and having Stanley potentially playing in the playoffs. I mean, what did we think the problem was with the Jets last year? We thought they got run out of the building against the Calgary team that, Milan Lucic and Sam Bennett seem to run roughshod over the Jets. How much have the Jets changed their look? Because I thought that was the most interesting comment Paul Maurice made about Logan Stanley, was that he really changes the look of their back end.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's size there, and I think that once you see Logan Stanley assert himself and be an assertive player. We talked about this a lot when Ben Sherratt was here. He played his best hockey when he was getting involved physically, and I think this same will be said with Logan Stanley eventually as well. But I mean, again, this is a guy that also has some puck skills. He's not just the big bruiser out there. So I do think that he's just starting to get settled in, and I do think that he does change the dynamic on the back end. And again, I totally understand why. I mean, what we've seen all year long, for the majority of the time, the Jets have had a bigger guy with one of their other defensemen. I mean, It's Derek Forbert, it's Tucker Poolman, and now it's Logan Stanley on the other pairing. Earlier it was Beaulieu. So it's interesting. I mean, it's still a work in progress, and we know that this will continue to develop. I mean, the Jets, they still gave up a fair amount, tonight for sure. They were a lot tighter the other night. But again, Sean, this is a team playing for its season, and the exact same thing is going to happen on Friday when the Jets are back in action against a Calgary Flames team that now has lost 2 in a row to Ottawa and 5 games this season to the Senators. If the Jets win 2 out of 3, Calgary, I'm not saying Calgary is done, but they're in a big world of trouble. If the Flames can't win 2 out of 3, their chances of making the playoffs are going to be slimmer. There's no doubt about that.
I want to go to this comment from John Chan.
Sure.
One, because, I mean, it's where I want to go next. But two, John Chan checking in from Singapore. Like, how awesome is that? Good job, my man. I appreciate that. And beyond that, like, you animals, it's 1:17 in the morning and there's 111 of you tuned in live here right now.
Well done.
I can't believe this. This is I'm barely holding on. I'm stabbing myself under the desk with a fork to keep my eyes open here. But let's go. Let's dive in. let's dive into this because we did in the pregame, but let's get back to it now. And based on the way that Logan Stanley has played, and I mean, this is how careers start, is by taking advantage of opportunities and moving into the lineup and never coming out. Do you think that what we've seen from this defense group is enough to expect that when Nathan Beaulieu is healthy and ready to come back into the lineup, that there's a good chance he's not coming back into the lineup?
Yeah, I think it's always important. I mean, it's certainly trending that way, Sean. But again, it's always, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself when it comes to these discussions. I mean, we're always asked to project, and it certainly makes sense why people are wondering. I think right now, if Logan Stanley continues to play at that level, he will deserve to stay in the lineup. But again, sample size is important. Let's see how it goes for the next 10-game stretch. We know that in the second half of the year, intensity will rise, the pace gets higher, there's more desperation. So for me, the biggest thing about Stanley, and that's a great point, he looks composed. That's the thing. A lot of people were like, oh, will he be able to handle the speed? Will he be able to handle the pace of the game? Will he be able to handle the decision making? Well, all of those things he's doing a very good job with. And we saw it the other night. He was beaten on a play, or it looked like he might have been beaten on the play. What does he do? Well, he thought, you know what? I'm taller than everyone on the ice. If I lay out, I can poke this puck to my partner and out of harm's way. And that's exactly what he did. For a rookie to be doing that and to make that smart play in a quick attention span situation, what tells you all you need to know about Logan Stanley. That was an impressive play. It was a small play. It doesn't show up on any stats sheet or anything else, but it prevented a potential scoring chance in the neutral zone. So I think he's processing the information pretty well. He'll always need to work on his skating, but he's worked on his skating and he's seeing results from it, and I think he'll continue to work on it. Again, I would say he's a very similar player to Andrew Copp in the regard that he's not just happy being... Is he thrilled about being in the NHL? Yes. He's not just wanting to be a guy who hangs around on the third pairing and gets 12 minutes. He's determined to try to get better, solidify his spot in the lineup, and then push for more, because that's what these guys want. They're not just happy being in the NHL. They're thrilled about it, yes, but they're not going to get complacent because there's guys behind you pushing you.
Boffa Jones, I know how you feel with the late night stuff here. I got to drive the kids tomorrow morning. I also got to get up and do a hit with 92 City FM. That it's fun when you do it, but man, after nights like this, waking up for it, before 8 o'clock is always a bit of a grind. But it is what it is. Kenny, I love the chirps. I love it when the audience gets in on this and they start chirping us. So I'm always going to highlight that stuff. What's Dale Sawchuk talking about here? I missed this. What did Murat zing you in the Copp interview?
It wasn't really a full zing. And also, too, I think if people don't know, Murat and I did work together. And this was one of the situations where I would describe was similar to when I asked a question in tone that seemed obvious that I was joking about it when I asked Paul Maurice if he had wished he had gone to 3-on-3 overtime earlier. Murat did say, should someone in the media bring up or call your line a checking line before every game? Like, he was intimating, but also joking that Copp was offended, and his response to being offended was that he went out and scored 4 goals. So yeah. I certainly didn't consider it a zinger. Murat and I have been texting since the game has ended, so I don't want to speak for him, but from what I know of him, I don't think that was a true zinger. But if it was, I've got broad shoulders and I can take it.
Hey, you know what? It's that classic weeb passive aggression that everyone's picking up on. He comes in with the smile and he asks you a question, but there's a little bit of a jab hidden in there. I love it. He gets the good interactions. Murat, as well as a Pinawa boy, and I was born, I've said on this show before, born in the Pinawa hospital. We're a couple of years apart and kind of discovered that we were both Pinawa boys at some point. But if you need me to protect you, if there's some zingers coming your way, I can throw some elbows in the corner if you need me to there, Kenny.
Hey, let's just... that's why you're on the team, right?
Yeah, there you go, zingers. But at least that wasn't your classic passive aggression. You at least came right to my face with that
Exactly.
one.
Hey, I'm the sorry. People who know me, I'm the person talking to you between the whistles, but then slashing you between the elbow pad and the glove when there's a battle for the puck.
One of my best buddies was like that. Like he'd like to reach across if you were playing against him, just slash the tips of your fingers, and you'd get so mad, and he'd like line up at the next draw, and he'd be like, "Oh, hey, I think I caught you there. I'm sorry." And you'd be like, "Okay, it must have been an accident." And then they drop the puck, and he'd do it right away again. He was one of those guys. I want to get back to a comment that was made earlier on because I find it fascinating, and I passed by it because we're kind of on a point. But people were talking about PLD and Laine and the trade and how they feel that that's worked out. This one is an interesting one. How do you think the room is since PLD came here and Patrick Laine is gone?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I understand that narrative is out there. I don't think this is something where the Jets had to remove Patrick Laine from the room in order to somehow unlock their success. I don't think he was a disruptive force in that room at all. But I do think that what we've talked about, there are certain players who have been able to spread their wings a little bit more. And I mean, one of them was probably the guy who was hurt the most by his departure. One of his best friend was Nikolai Ehlers. But with Laine's departure, Ehlers' role, it was already growing with the Jets. And it's not to say it might not have grown to the same level if Laine had stayed. But with the departure, Ehlers has had the opportunity to spread his wings with this team. He's becoming piece of, he was already a core piece, but I think he's becoming a bigger part of the leadership group. I think he's taken on more responsibility. And the biggest thing for me, Sean, we know he started looking for a shot more last year, but one of the problems when Laine and Ehlers played together, they always looked for the extra pass, and Ehlers often looked for Laine because he was always known for his shot. So I think now, and again, that's it's not that he doesn't look for Kyle Connor, he certainly does. But I think he's had an opportunity to really spread his wings, but I don't think that has anything to do with what the locker room is like. I think one of the benefits that you may see in the locker room from the trade itself was that you don't, as much as players were saying it wasn't a distraction, and Laine did a good job of saying he didn't want to be a distraction, but when the hockey shows are constantly talking about trade boards and when is this guy going to be moved, that can't do anything but, cause a little bit of tension, not necessarily, poor things, but that's got to cause some tension because you never know how long that guy's going to be there. I mean, same with, I know the one thing that was strange about training camp, Sean, and you know this, there were almost no questions about Jack Roslovic during training camp. Was that because, I mean, again, the coach isn't going to bring up a guy who's not there, but I think that's because they knew he was gone. But with Laine, I think everyone expected Laine to be there for the whole season and that a move would be made in the offseason. That is awesome.
That is really awesome. Yeah.
Thank
Sorry,
you, Dave.
I didn't mean to take you
no,
up. I just
not
think
at
people,
all.
when they're doing that kind of stuff, deserve a heck of a shout out. And I
It's
want to make
awesome.
sure we get that. Didn't mean to disturb your point there. I know I did.
No, not at all. No, it's totally fine. Like I said, I don't think that it was that Laine was a disruptive person. I mean, this is a guy that came to work and got the job done, even though you knew there was this potential trade kind of hanging over everything. But I think the fact that the trade was made and that they got a high-end player in return, that, speaking of changing the dynamic and complexion of this team, Sean, the arrival of Pierre-Luc Dubois has changed the dynamic of the Winnipeg Jets. We know that Paul Stastny was already doing a good job in that second-line center role, but it's really changed how the Jets look and how other teams are going to try to defend against them. And that's also has something to do with the expansion of the role for the third line, which, again, let's call them the checking plus line. And when I say checking line, I mean that because their importance is that they almost never spend any time defending in their own zone. And as most of our knowledgeable hockey fans on our chats know, when you play against offensive players, a lot of times they're not interested in checking, Sean. So you know what that means? That means you spend a lot of time in the offensive zone. And now with what we've seen in terms of the finish from Lowry, Appleton, and Copp, they're getting some great results.
if we go back to the original topic about Laine, I honestly think that there is something to the room and how it is working right now. And I mean, we know that there was tension in that room. We've heard that from our sources. We know that that was an issue in the background. I think, there was an acknowledgement of it when Wheeler talked about it after he left. I think the fact that Kevin Cheveldayoff had said that, the analytics said time and time again that Patrick Laine wasn't a fit in certain areas. I thought that was something that we're not used to hearing from Kevin Cheveldayoff. And I thought Paul Maurice's explanation of any regrets he may have was his regret was that they couldn't convince Patrick Laine of the opportunity that he was getting there. I mean, that may be totally right, but to me, it also sounds like me saying to you, I'm sorry that you are upset right now, right? It's not me saying, I'm sorry I did something. I'm sorry you feel that way, Ken, but I'm not going to do anything about that. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois comes in, and Pierre-Luc Dubois looks like a player who is rejoicing to be here, who wants to fit in. And this is the other part of it that I think we talked about this time and time again. The Winnipeg Jets are a team full of hockey nerds. We talked about how Andrew Copp has got to the point where he is, how he works with Mark Scheifele, these guys who like to dig in. I'm not saying that Patrick Laine doesn't love hockey and doesn't want to do that all the time. And I think he works really, really hard at his craft. And I think you don't get a shot that I believe is one of the top 5 shots of all time in the history of the game without putting a ton of work into it. But I don't necessarily think he's that guy that doesn't like to get away from the game and breathe a little bit more than what you would see. I think PLD more fits in with the culture of this team, and I would think that has to have an effect on that room. Mind you, the point was made, we haven't been in that room, so I don't know how good of a sense I have of it. That's just what I think is the expectation based on the changes that have been made.
Sure. My only counter to that, Sean, is, going back to Maurice's point, what do you think Nikolai Ehlers thinks about his opportunity? I think that's Paul Maurice's point. Ehlers doesn't seem to be having any trouble producing in a second line role. I mean, we know it's beginning to be more of a 1A and 1B situation, but I would counter by saying, hey, Nikolai Ehlers is on the second line, so is Kyle Connor. Yes, they've spent some time on the top line, but it hasn't hampered their productivity. Yes, okay. Of course, the difference is that Laine wasn't playing with someone like Pierre-Luc Dubois for the majority of the time. I understand that, but I think it's the willingness to embrace that rather than what we talked about a lot. And this is not a knock against Patrick, because we know that as a second overall pick, he wanted to be a first-line player. But the willingness to accept the fact that there are 6 interchangeable players in the top 6, for lack of a better term, I think that maybe might have been more of the underlying message from Maurice there.
Okay, so I think you touched on it there, and I think that's the important part. I think Nick Ehlers may view himself as a really, really good secondary player. I think that he's accepted that role and he's moved into that, but I don't think every player is built like that. To me, Patrick Laine is a player built for stardom. It's what he wants. He wants the spotlight. He grabs the spotlight. He does stuff underneath that spotlight. And my counter would be, if you were to take, like a lot of people are asking for, and take Nick Ehlers and Kyle Connor and give them first-line minutes on this team, like so many fans are screaming for, how do you think Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele would respond to that? I know they tell you that hey, we're going to do whatever we need to do, and Blake Wheeler said it the other day, we're going to do what we need to do and what Paul thinks we need to do to be the team that succeeds. But do you really think that a player like Mark Scheifele would be happy playing second fiddle?
Oh, no, but I mean, there's no reason for him to have to play second fiddle at this stage, right?
Well, but don't you think there's an argument there to be made about Patrick Laine that there was no reason for a guy who had the potential at 19 to win the Rocket Richard Trophy and put up 44 goals? Is there any reason why he should not be in a scenario where a team is building their offense around capitalizing on that weapon? I mean, in the end, this is the whole philosophical argument here, right? Is that and people fall on either side of it. I think Patrick Laine is a weapon that and has a skill set that very few people, not just in the league right now, but in the history of the game, have had but it is a weapon that is not a primary weapon. It's not Connor McDavid skating down the ice and taking care of business. He needs someone to feed him in the right spots, and he's the trigger man. He's a Brett Hull. He's the kind of guy who can be a legendary player, but he needs to have the right guys feeding him the puck. So that makes it problematic, and maybe to your point, that's not Mark Scheifele. Maybe Mark Scheifele is the guy who's able to get it done for himself. But I guess I understand, and I don't necessarily equate Laine's situation to Ehlers, because I think Ehlers is okay being a secondary guy. I don't think Laine is.
Yeah, I think that Nikolai Ehlers views himself as a first-line player too, and just knows that right now with the opportunity he has, he's just got to make the most of it. So, I mean, again, you know this, and so do most people, but I'm a big fan of Patrick Laine's game. I thought we saw some tremendous growth in his game last year. I'm quite surprised at how, again, I wasn't surprised that he got off to a great start. I'm surprised things have kind of flattened out for him, but again, what we're talking about, both of us, he is not playing with an elite level centerman right now, and that's made it a challenge. So,
right.
All I'm saying is that Ehlers is a guy who, although he wants to play on the top line, he's okay with it now because he knows he can be productive in the role that he's been given. So it's not a knock on Patrick Laine's inability to accept a role or anything like that. I think that you just have to make the most of the minutes that you get, and that's the same thing. Ehlers wishes he was a 20-minute player, I'm sure, and he'll continue to push to try to get to that level.
Let's get to Hellebuyck. It's funny that we're just getting to it now because Paul Maurice actually joked about it in the press conference. We got real deep into the press conference, and no one brought up Connor Hellebuyck, who is that close to back-to-back shutouts. Just what do you think that we saw from him? I mean, I'll tell you first what I saw from him in that Toronto Maple Leaf series. We saw a guy who wanted to go out and prove that he could get it done in the biggest of moments, and did it in that moment, then seemed to have a little bit of a slide after that. But okay, 2 straight losses, and we joked in the pregame, like we're looking back on this, and it's like, oh my God, the Jets lost 2 straight games. Everyone was panicking for a bit, and probably not, but it seemed like the most panic that we'd felt from this team so far this year. But in a moment where they needed to right the ship, who's right there being the steadiest hand out there on the ice other than Connor Hellebuyck?
Yeah, difference makers. I mean, that's what we saw. So what we saw in this series was the top line driving the bus right out of the first shift, basically, on Monday's game. And you also saw Connor Hellebuyck locked in like we have seen before plenty of times, but really locked in. I mean, again, we know he's having a steady year, a solid year. He's under siege a lot of nights. But the thing that was wild, that was standing out, and we know that scoring is up in the North Division, but even though he would never say it publicly, I am certain that Connor Hellebuyck looked at, or someone told him, or he heard it somewhere, and someone said, well, you've given up 3 or more in 8 in a row and 12 of 13, and said, you know what? I'm sick of this. Not that he wasn't sick of it before, but he basically did everything in his power so that that narrative went away quickly, because everyone who watches the Jets knows that Hellebuyck has been playing at a high level. So for me, what we saw Saturday after the game in Edmonton, you saw a little bit of frustration, but you also saw calm from Hellebuyck, who is a big power of positivity person. He said, we're not going to let this slide. We know what we need to do, and guess what? He went out and did something about it, and it's just impressive. And that's anyone that you talk to, all the people who think that the Jets, we understand their analytics aren't great. They give up a lot of high danger chances, no doubt about that. But when a goalie as good as Connor Hellebuyck gets locked in the way he was the last 2 games, the way he was against Toronto, that's the type of goalie that can push a team into a lengthy playoff run. We've seen it at times. Yes, we've also seen a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury play out of his mind in the Western Conference Final. We've seen Jordan Binnington go head-to-head with Hellebuyck. And then, yes, last year against a depleted Jets lineup, we saw what we would have never predicted, that Cam Talbot outplayed Connor Hellebuyck. But that's not to point the finger at Hellebuyck. Hellebuyck was adequate to good. I think he was actually quite good in that series, but the other guy played a little bit better, and that's something that doesn't sit well with Connor Hellebuyck. And I think that as much as he loved winning the Vezina last year and wants to win multiple Vezinas, he knows that he wants to go into the playoffs and deliver some incredible performances. I mean, he's done it before. We know how good he had to play against Nashville. But this is a guy who's determined on the biggest stage to shine the brightest.
A couple comments that I just have to talk about here. This one from Rick Talou. These post-game K&Rs, like leaving the arena and going to the bar and finding yourself having a table. Hey, that to me is a massive compliment, because I mean, this is what we're trying to accomplish, is just a sense of community with the team here, or excuse me, with the fans. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to get out and do that. Did you see the comment about the pierogies with scrambled eggs? Did you see that?
No, I'm not a big eggs person, and I'm going to have to leave that to our friends in the comment box.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try
it. Okay.
I'm going to try it, because it's funny. Sometimes you get these things where you get your kids to ask you questions, like 20 questions. Ask your kid a question about you, and then like it's actually strange the way they think about you. But the one thing is, when one of the questions was, "What's my favorite food?" And they're like, "Oh, it's eggs, hands down." And it's true. I eat eggs like crazy. But that's an interesting one. I'm going to have to try that. I want to get back just quickly to the Hellebuyck point that you were making there. And I wonder, do you think that maybe Connor Hellebuyck, who is, such a hard worker in trying to get to where he wants to, and with the time off heading into the bubble last year, I'd had him on a long form interview where he'd said that he wasn't able to train, he wasn't able to get into the rink like he wanted to. One of the things that he was doing is he was watching old hockey games that he wasn't a part of, and watching the goaltenders and trying to put himself in the headspace of those goaltenders and how they would feel in the moment and how he would respond compared to what he thought he was seeing from them. I thought it was fascinating, but in the end, I don't know how much it would have worked for him. Do you think Connor Hellebuyck, given his propensity to want to prepare, may have been affected more by that time off than most other goalies, if not players, heading into that bubble? And maybe that's why we saw from him what we did in the playoffs last year?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was just a, confluence of circumstances, to be honest. I mean, Mark Scheifele lasted 3 shifts. I mean, Patrick Laine was hurt in the first game. I would have loved to have seen that series transpire with 2 healthy rosters. We know that injuries are part of the game. There's no doubt about it. I think that Hellebuyck put in a ton of work and did everything that he could during the break. But, I mean, this is a guy that thrives on a heavy workload. I mean, of course, being off for all those months would have impacted him in a negative fashion. There's no doubt about it. We know that, there wasn't any ice to be had in Michigan for a long stretch. So I think he did everything he could to be ready. But I also think he's ready for his next close-up, and I think he's going to absolutely shine when that time comes.
Couple ones. Let's get through these quick. But Paul Maurice had said that this 2-game set was closer than it looked. His line was, they were hitting the outsides of the posts, we were hitting the insides of the posts. Do you buy his assertion that this series was closer than it looked?
I do think it was not, this is not a, blowout series. I mean, I do think the Jets did definitely, earn what they got. They weren't coasting through this, and they, yes, they got some breaks. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, I think they were very sound defensively with only the 22 shots against in the Monday game. I think, we're looking over a wider stretch. I mean, yes, there were those games, but then you also, if we're widening the lens back to the last game against Toronto, well, now for a big stretch of time, they were pretty good defensively. So again, that's Paul Maurice reminding his team that there's no willingness to take an exhale. Like you and I have talked about this, Sean. I mean, after that Leafs series, I mean, the Jets didn't agree, but I think it was natural for them to take a deep breath after that series. Yeah. And although there was, a not so subtle shot by Paul Maurice saying that the media made a bigger deal about it than they did. Is that true? Maybe. I mean, you can certainly say it publicly, but we know for a fact that the Jets wanted to know how they measured up against Toronto, and they figured it out during that series. I mean, was it a big deal that they got 5 out of 6 points? No, not in the grand scheme of things, but I think mentally, to show that they could compete against them is something that they will take forward with them. Now, similarly to how Edmonton responded to getting smoked by the Leafs. Now, the Jets have shown that after having a little bit of adversity,
Right.
Guess
I was
what?
thinking the exact same thing. Yeah.
Guess what? Now they're locked in. But here's the other part, Sean. The trip's not over yet for them. They still have 3 important games. They're at the most taxing portion of the schedule. Now you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. They've played 13 games out of this 17 game in 30-day stretch. You can see the light, but they still can't really afford a slip up, if you will. I mean, are they going to win all 4 of those games? Probably not. Could they? Maybe. But now they've got their structure back. And that's the most important thing for the second half. You're starting to get a template of how the Jets need to play in order to have sustained success down the stretch. And when you see them playing that way, they can compete with all the teams in this division. They know that. But they also know that if they're not sharp, then they can look ordinary, like they did against Edmonton. And even then, I think there were also still some stretches against Edmonton where they were very good. Mm-hmm. But then a couple of world-class players exerted their will, and next thing you know, you look up, there's 2 losses.
I got a question. How would Paul Maurice know if the media made a bigger deal out of that Toronto series than they did? Because he tells us he doesn't pay attention or listen to the media. What's going on there?
He says he doesn't read, but I'm guessing that there may have been some, it was all over the, the highlight shows, and you know what it's like. There's people that are reading the clips in that organization, and that information gets back to the coaching staff when they feel it's necessary.
Okay. I'll take that explanation. Last thing I want to talk about here. I thought this was interesting because if you take a look at the amount of times that we've talked with Blake Wheeler post-game this season, it hasn't happened a lot. This will speak to the depth of this team, I'm sure. But are you surprised how often this season the top line has not been the story in big victories? Based on the number of times Nick Ehlers has shown up and stolen the show, and the second line and this third line has done it time and time again. I think of Nate Thompson scoring that big goal against the Canadiens in the second game that they played against them. Are you surprised how often the first line on this team is not the story anymore, whereas one time they were the story time and time again?
No, not really. I mean, I don't think it's a reflection of poor play. I mean, here's the other part about tonight. I mean, Blake Wheeler blocks a shot in his first shift, and I think he had to skip one. So I don't think his legs felt quite as good as the other night, or his foot certainly didn't feel as good as the other night. But I think the top line was very good today, and I think there were other things that you saw in terms of their defensive awareness. You saw some good back pressure. I know that Mark Scheifele's defensive woes or play have been a subject of, consternation for many fans. I thought I saw a lot of really smart plays by Scheifele and some really good commitment in his own zone. I thought that line played well, especially early. But, I mean, it's a reflection on the team, and it's a reflection on the secondary scoring and the fact that this is not a one-line hockey team. And that's not to say that on nights they don't have to dominate every night. They dominated the other night, right? I mean, yeah, sure, the second goal was a late goal, but the first line dominated play the other night. They don't have to dominate every night because they have a deep team. I still thought that the top line played well, and I expect them to continue to play well. And I also think, too, Mark Scheifele is a guy who still had been very productive during that stretch, but he'd only had 1 goal in his last 13 games. I think he still had 10 points in that stretch, but I think that's another thing where there'll be a little bit of an exhale there, and I think that Mark's the kind of guy that can get on a real roll. We know there's a lot of attention being paid to him, and that'll continue to be the case against Calgary, but I think I'll be surprised if the top line doesn't have a good series against the Calgary Flames. I think that the Flames are a team that is certainly going to be paying attention to everybody, but I think that Mark Scheifele has had some games where the matchup has really tilted in his favor. He's had a lot of success against Sean Monahan. I would imagine Darryl Sutter would like to stay away from that, but I think that Scheifele is poised for a breakout stretch, if you will.
Kenny, I am going to get out of this while we can because we're closing in on an hour. We should probably pop out of here.
We have to make it an hour. Somebody challenge. It was a challenge. Challenge accepted here.
Well, I was going to say I can promo our stuff. It takes me about a minute.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
And I figure I would take the out. We try to include the audience as much as we can. I think we do a good job. There's a lot of comments here, and our chat room has absolutely devolved into a giant debate about pierogies and how to prepare them.
There we go. Here's an important one.
That. Oh, this is huge. 102 people watching Jets commentary. It's 112 right now watching Jets commentary at 2 a.m. It's not quite 2 a.m. And I'm not gonna let it get there. I know you're trying to push it there. I know you're trying to distract me right now and just bring up other stuff and be like, oh, hey, you know what else I was thinking about? I know where you're going with this. But we should get out of here because we got about 30 seconds left before we get to an hour. And MC Stuttering Buddha, he's trying to make it an hour. It's going to be an hour in 28 seconds. It is an hour. The hour has happened. Just wanted to remind everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I can't believe this. At this time in the morning, we've got over 100 people checking in. Hopefully, you'll keep checking it out. If you are watching from anything other than YouTube right now, make sure you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, we've got these post games on here, and we were getting a lot of love earlier today. Actually, that was more so on the Instagram, but a lot of people were talking about the long form shows that we do Fridays 9 in the morning. That's really good stuff. We've had some really good conversations. I hope everyone goes and checks that stuff out. We've got Harn Ryan Singh on this Friday. I was just talking with him before we hopped on here, Ken. And we have Eric Francis, the franchise, who's going to give us some great stuff and set up the match between the Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets. Everyone, it just blows us away time and time again that people show up like this. You're getting the happy birthdays, Ken. I think this was a great way to start your birthday, your 46th trip around the sun here. Thank you so much, everybody. We love speaking with you. Come check us out on Instagram before the games at the Sean Reynolds Instagram account. Keep looking for us after the games. It's good, promise. It's going to get to a place where you don't have to stay up till the middle of the night to watch these things, but we love it that you did. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. We will see you all on Friday, Ken?
Friday morning for the long form is our next one.
And
9 a.m. 9 a.m.
Yes, and I guess I should have started the show like this, but good morning to anyone who's listening to this the morning after. We appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much, everybody. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Appreciate your time. Have a great night.